If you love quick and easy projects that are useful, this tutorial is for you. I'm going to show you how to make a really cute little fabric basket that only needs one fat quarter or two if you'd like the lining to have different fabric. Now it's perfect for your Easter treats, your Halloween candy, or your sewing supplies that always end up all over your sewing table. Let me show you how to make a fabric basket. So these are the cutting instructions. You could take a screenshot right now, or I'll also put a link in the description below for my blog post where you can find out more information. I also have a PDF pattern in 4 sizes if you'd prefer that. So we're going to start off by pressing, and I've got my lining pieces and my fusible fleece. We've got 2 pieces of each and they all measure 6.5 inches by 8.5 inches. So what I'm going to do is press those. So on the wrong side of your lining, take a piece of your fusible fleece. And we've got one side that's bumpy, that's your glue, so we'll face that down towards our wrong side of our fabric, and then we're going to press. And it does take a few seconds to really adhere to your fabric, and the more adhered it is, the easier it is to work with and sew with. Now I'm using fusible fleece. That is what I like to use when I'm making projects like this. You might not have it, you might like to just use an interfacing. You might like to use interfacing and the fleece to make your basket really structured. Just whatever your preferences will be absolutely fine. I'm going to do it on this side too. You can see it's still not even stuck at all there, so it can take a moment. I'll do the same for the second piece. Now we're going to move on to our strap, and this piece measures 4 inches by 11 inches. And again, I've got a little bit of fleece, and that's 1 inch by 13 inches. So for my strap, I'm going to fold that in half, wrong sides together, press. Then I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to fold the raw edges into that press line. And then I'll press. And I'll do the same on this side. And then what I'll do is I'll just fold it in half again and just press. We want to be able to see our lines. Then what I'm going to do is open it up, and I'm going to take my fleece and I'm going to place it on one of the center parts of that pressed piece. And I'm just going to press it down. And I've just placed it within the press lines. I'll just turn it over, press it again. And then what I'm going to do is just fold the raw edges back in towards the center, and then fold it back in half and press. Now I'm just going to pin it. I'm going to make sure those edges are lined up nicely, and then we're going to sew it closed. So I'm going to sew with about a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm using my left compensating foot, which is a foot you can get for the Juki TL sewing machines. Just use whatever foot makes most sense for you. I'm using wonderful confetti thread, and I'm stitching at stitch length 3 because this is more decorative. And I do like longer stitches for decorative parts. So just going to start on the very edge and sew all the way along, removing my pins as I need to. Coming right off the end, cutting my thread, and now I'm just going to do exactly the same on the other side. Now our strap's all done, I will give that a quick press and then we'll move on. So now we're going to take our 2 main pieces of fabric and our 2 lining pieces of fabric, and we're going to draw a 2-inch square on all the bottom corners. Now, if you're using directional fabric, do make sure it's facing the right way. And with this project, directional fabric is absolutely fine with the way we're constructing it. So I'm going to take my ruler, find my 2-inch line there, and place the 2-inch mark on this edge of the fabric and on the bottom edge of the fabric. So now I'm just going to draw my line, And then I'll do the same on this corner. And I'll repeat this for the other piece of main fabric and the 2 pieces of lining fabric. Then what I'm going to do is take a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut those squares out. I find this is easier to do drawing it and using scissors, because if you use a rotary cutter, you kind of got to go a little bit past where you want to stop to then get down on the next line, if that makes sense. I don't think that made any sense at all. What I'm trying to say is scissors are definitely easier for this part of the process. Okay, so I'll repeat that for my other 3 pieces. So now with our 4 pieces, I'm going to place the 2 main pieces of fabric right sides together, line up all the edges, and then I'll pop some pins in. We're going to sew along each side and along the bottom. So just 2 or 3, just to make sure it's all going to stay in place. Just like that is fine. Of course, you could use more if you'd like to, and I'll do the same for the lining fabric. And if you are making a bigger size, you will probably need a few more pins. Okay, let's sew. Now I've changed my foot over to my 1/4 inch foot to get our 1/4 inch seam, and I've lowered my stitches down to 2, and I'm going to start on the very edge again and sew along until I get down to the bottom. Remove your pins if they're going to get in the way. Cut my thread and then I'll just turn it around. Looks like that's not quite lined up there, so I'm going to just fix that. Remember, if things aren't looking perfect, you can always just take a pause and fix them up as you go. So I'll sew along that edge. And then the final edge. And I'll repeat that for my lining pieces, and we'll remove those pins too. Now we're going to find our opening and we're going to sew our corners closed. So we're going to open it up and then we're going to find the seams and line the seams up. And I just press one way and one the other. And what we can do is nest them. So we've got the seam pressing going this way, the seam pressing going this way. Well, we push them up against each other as far as we can. And then I just like to open it up and check I'm creating a nice straight line, and when I'm happy I will pop a pin in. And then I'm just going to do the same on the other side. And depending on which way I folded it over on this side, I'll make sure I'm doing the same on this side, so that we're getting, when we sew down our seams, this seam isn't going to be crossed over and make a little ridge there. We want our seams all going the same way. And when I'm happy, I'll just place another pin in. And then now all I'm going to do is sew along this edge with our 1/4 inch seam allowance again on both sides, and I'll do this for both pieces. So now what we're going to do is sew along this edge, but make sure you start where the fold is. So find your 1/4 inch seam allowance, but instead of coming out from this raw edge, make sure you're starting up by the fold. And I will go forward a few stitches, and then do a back stitch. And then I'll carry on until I get to the bottom. Sewing right up to that fold again and then doing a back stitch. I'll repeat that on this side and then I'll do exactly the same on my lining. Now we're going to take our main fabric and our strap. Now work out which side you'd like to be your right side, the side that will be sitting up like that will see more. And I think I'd like this to be my right side, so I'm going to place that down so it's right sides together, right side of the strap and right side of my main fabric. And I'm going to pop it inside. And then what I'm going to do is on each side, I'm going to find that side seam again And I'm going to line up the edges of my strap with that side seam. And I also want to make sure it's nice and straight. So the easiest way to make sure it's straight is to make sure it's nicely lined up. And then when I'm happy, I will pop some pins in to hold it in place. And then I'm going to come over to this side. Make sure it's not accidentally twisted. We want it nice and flat. And I'll do exactly the same on this side. You can also, I'm just going to fold it like that to check it's lined up with my stitches there. It looks like it is going to create a nice straight line. And then we'll just do a quick stitch just to hold those in place to make it a little bit easier for ourselves when we're sewing it all together. So I'm just going to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from that edge because we don't want to see this when we've sewn it all together. And I'm just going to start on the edge there. It's just literally to hold it in place when we're sewing our lining to it. I'm just going to come off the edge, cut my thread, and do the same on this side. Okay, now I'm just going to take my main fabric and turn it right sides out. And then I'm going to place it inside my lining so we've got right sides together. Then what I'm going to do is line up all my edges and pin it. And I'm going to start at the side seams. So finding the side seam here. Now we've sewn that strap in place, so we can't make sure those side seams line up absolutely perfectly, but we can do our best guess. So just, I'm actually going to line up those stitches there with that side seam and then raise it up a bit and then pop some pins in. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I'll do the same on this side. And then I'm just going to pull at it there to make sure that lining is all sitting nicely. And then I'll find the center and just pop a pin in there. And then I'll do the same on this side. I'm just going to pop that lining, the main fabric, down a bit because it's popping up a bit too high. We want it all lined up nicely. And if you'd like to, you could pop in a few more pins, whatever you're comfortable with. I think the more the merrier. Now when we're sewing around this edge, we do need to leave an opening. So if you're not going to remember that, you could take a washable marker at this point and just mark where you want to stop and start. But I'm going to remember that this time. Okay, so we're still sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I've started about 2 inches away from my strap here. So I'm going to go forward a few stitches and then I will do a back stitch, because when we turn things right sides out, it does tend to pull at those stitches. And then I'm just going to go all the way around, removing my pins as I need to. So I just take my time. I'm never in a rush when I'm sewing, but I just find things tend to work out better when you're not rushed and you're just taking your time. So I'm coming back up to where I started. I'm going to leave about a 3 inch opening, and then I'm going to do a back stitch again. And then cut my thread, remove that last pin, and now let's turn it right sides out. So just finding my opening, putting my fingers through, grabbing the corner of our lining and just pulling that through. Now this is never graceful, so just do your best. Okay, now we're going to push our lining in. Now the reason that I pressed the fusible fleece to the lining is I feel like sometimes it can look a little bit crinkly or wrinkly, so I prefer that to be on the lining than on my main fabric. So now just take a minute to get it all sitting nicely, and if you need to, you could use a point turner. I think we're going to be okay for this project. It all looks like it's sitting really nicely. The most important thing to get sitting nicely is this top piece, and what we're going to do is give that a quick press. So the first thing I'm going to do is find this opening, and we want to fold it in about 1/4 inch on both sides, because that was our seam allowance. And then when we're happy that it looks like it's folded in nicely, so it's going to look like a nice straight line and like it wasn't even there, we will give that a press to hold it all in place. Well, not to hold it in place, but just to make sure it's sitting really nicely for when we sew it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the whole edge and just make sure those seams are sitting really nicely. We want to roll them right out. So when you're looking from the front, we're seeing the main fabric, and when we're looking from inside, we're just seeing the lining fabric. So for example, we don't want it kind of sitting down like that. We want to roll all those seams out really well and then press. And I'll do that around the whole edge. Okay, and if you want to, you can try and press the rest of it. It's looking a little bit wrinkled there. I think the best thing to do is to fold it down on the bottom and press it like that. All right, now what we're going to do is just sew along this top edge. But first I will just pop a pin in to make sure that's sitting really nicely before we sew. Okay, let's do our top stitch. So now what I'm going to do is carefully sew around that edge with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I have changed my foot again, and because that's the best one for me for this job. And yes, I do really change my feet every time I'm making projects like this, even for myself, not just when I'm showing you, because they really do make your life easier if you've got them. I'm going to change my stitch length back up to 3, because again, this is kind of a little bit more decorative. I've got my pin facing the wrong way, so I'm just going to pull that out and just hold it in place. And I'm going to just take my time and sew a really nice top stitch, which is going to close our opening up and just give it a really nice finished look. I am being careful not to accidentally sew the bottom of the bag down when I'm sewing this. If you do that, you'll end up in a right royal pickle. And we don't want any right royal pickles today. So I'm just readjusting as I need to. It is a little bit fiddly. If you have a free arm, that's where this part of the machine can actually be removed. You would use that right now. That would make this part much simpler. I don't have a free arm on this machine. It's still doable. It's just a little bit more fiddly. I'm coming right up to where I started, and I will go past those stitches, just 1 or 2, and then I'll do a back stitch. Cut my thread, and now I will trim any loose threads, and then let's take a look at our little basket. So there's our little fabric basket. Isn't that absolutely adorable? Now, don't forget you could use more fusible fleece, like you could use a layer of interfacing and fleece to make it a little bit more firmer, the construction of it. You could even use Bienni Soft and Stable if you wanted it to be much more structured, but I think that's absolutely lovely. You could use that for your Easter egg hunting. You could pop some things in there and have it on a shelf just to be decorative. Another fun idea could be to take this handle, and instead of sewing it the way we did, you could cut it in half and you could sew it on each side. And I think that would look really cute if you wanted to make one a little bit bigger for your fat quarters on your sewing room shelf. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget, I do have a PDF pattern and it has 4 different sizes. If you're interested in that, I'll put a link down below. If you're looking for other ideas for Easter or little treat bags, I've got these cute little bunny bags. I'll put the link up above. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.